Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Good day, good day. Thank you very much for joining us live for another edition of Women Making an Impact. This is a special episode that I'm having with my guest today, Carol Cox. We'll be talking about champions of change and why women voices are important to not only change the spaces that we're in, but also giving us the power to make decisions for ourselves and those around us. So thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much, Carol. I appreciate you being here. This conversation I've had on my mind for quite a while. So it feels great to have you, have you in this space to be able to share your expertise and share some of the things that you have learned along the way. For those of you who are joining me for the first time, my name is Solita Roberts. I'm an image coach and personal stylist, founder of Style to Impact. The purpose of Style to Impact for me, it's women empowerment through style, where I want to be able to give women the confidence, clarity, and closet they need to be able to go out and make the impact and influence they need in their career or business. So I appreciate you being here. Thanks again, Carol.
Oh, my pleasure, Salida. I am honored to be here, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Yes, like I said, I've been thinking about this for a while, and I think more and more that I got into the entrepreneurial space and getting to different conversations with women, and it just felt as though this is a conversation that needs to be had because there's so many women who are so afraid to use their voice, whether or not it's in the workplace or whether or not it's in their business. And I thought, okay, we have to change this. And sometimes what happens is that we need some of us, we need a guide, right? We're not always brave enough to say, okay, I'm going to raise my hand and I'm going to have this conversation. Which brings me to, I remember we had a conversation recently and you said that you are a disruptor.
Did I say that really? Okay, well, I'll take it.
Yes, you did. And honestly speaking, since I've followed your journey and being connected with the Speaking Your Brand company, it's like I can see that. So can you tell me, like, yes, you may not remember, but in a sense, what do you see a disruptor? Who's that person, and what would you like that to be?
Yeah, that's a good question. And for those of you who are watching, whether live or the replay, like I'd love to hear in the comments, as Salita and I have this conversation, what comes up for you, whether it's like, what fears do you have, or where have you spoken up? And even right now, this, what's a disruptor? What does the disruptor mean to you? And so the first thing that literally came to my mind, I'm a kind of a visual thinker, is I thought of being in a classroom as a kid. And you know how they have like disruptive students, like they'll label them as disruptive because they don't sit in their seat, or they talk out loud, or they don't raise their hand before they answer something. Well, I was the exact opposite. I'm the dutiful little girl, sitting there. I love to read. I like to think to myself. And so I was definitely not the disruptive kid at all. I was, the polar opposite. Yeah. So I think that, and there's no judgment here, like either way, like we need both types of people in the world. But what I think of disruptive now is ideas. What are disruptive ideas? Because it's really ideas that change the world, ideas that people bring to life, that force us to change, that force us to see things in a new way. And then that's how the way we see the world, our assumptions, our mental models, that's how, when those get shifted, is when we're willing to disrupt the status quo. And so that's how I wear this badge of being a disruptor, is really through the idea space.
Oh yeah, I love that. And I think whenever I think about disruptors, that's especially now, that's what I think about. Because generally when we hear, oh, you're a disruptor, it's like, okay, you're never towing the line, you're never doing things according to how the organization or the space that you're in, you should be doing it, right? And we tend to think disruptors are negative people, but they're just coming into a space just to create chaos. But I think when I look at it and I think of how can we use our voices, is that you have to be that. You have to be a disruptor. You have to be willing to say, okay, I am going to speak up regardless of what the consequences are, because we generally think that if I speak up, if I share my views on whether or not it's, women's issues or Black Lives Matter or anything like that, if you speak on it, you will lose If you're an entrepreneur, you lose business. If you are working for someone, that you'll be marginalized, or just kind of like um where you're isolated, right? And people are looking at you
Mhm.
in a different light. Do you find like any part of your career journey you found that you couldn't speak up in certain arenas, based you couldn't share your viewpoints on certain things?
So I may be an unusual case. I am not one who shies away from sharing my opinions about things. I think it's my lifelong interest in politics, which I've been interested in since I was a teenager through
Okay.
college, and then was involved in local politics as a chairperson and a media spokesperson. So I've always been confident sharing my opinions. Now, of course, there have been some situations in my career where it just didn't feel like the right time and place to share something in particular, or maybe something is better said in private versus in public. So you always have to kind of gauge what seems appropriate for that particular situation. And I know for especially a lot of women who are in corporate, who work for companies, there's definitely there's a balance there, because obviously you want to keep your job, you want to do well, you want to get promoted, you want to have good relationships with your bosses and with your coworkers. And so I'm hoping that more company cultures change, so that the culture actually encourages people to share ideas that may not go along with the status quo, and that it's that type of culture versus the opposite, where people do get penalized, or there are negative consequences for speaking up.
Oh yeah, I love that. And I think that's mostly the concern of a lot of women in the spaces that they're in, right?
Hmm.
If I speak up, I'll be penalized. I know I've mentioned this before when we were offline, that I've watched the Simone versus herself. It's like a mini series that she has on Facebook Watch.
Hmm.
It's like, if you want to be able to watch it, like all the recordings are there. But I watched one yesterday where she was talking about not realizing the power of her voice. Not First of all, she didn't realize that she had a voice, and then she didn't realize that it was as powerful as everyone thought it was, right? And this was concerning the issue with a couple of years ago, where we talked about where that whole scandal came up with the doctors,
Hmm.
that they were at this training center, and all the gymnasts looked at her as the one to lead the conversation, because apparently when she spoke up and said, yes, I was molested as well,
Hmm.
that's when the organization, so to speak, took notice. But
Hmm.
what I found interested in that particular episode is that she said that, okay, I've now realized the power of my voice, but I don't want to speak on certain issues because I'm still under the umbrella. I'm still, you know, quote unquote, these are my employees. And I think that's more than anything what a lot of women go through, is like, how can we speak up even if the institution hasn't really changed to allow us to do that?
Yeah, this is a great question, Salita. And to your point, Simone Biles, Olympic champion multiple times over. I mean, like what they call the GOAT,
Yeah.
greatest of all time, right? And she truly is. She's an absolute incredible athlete. And for her to be hesitant to speak up when she has so much leverage, like she probably has the most leverage than anyone in USA gymnastics has,
Yeah.
and that she also had those fears, just goes to show how important it is for more of us to do so. So for those of you watching and listening, and if you are in a kind of in a company or institution where maybe you feel like you don't quite have the leverage that the Simone Biles has in hers, and that so get support from others around you. It is hard to be the solo person kind of stepping out, because you do feel really vulnerable, and you are really vulnerable as that sole person. But if you can get others kind of together as a group, and then go together with your ideas, or with your initiatives, or with the changes that you want to make, and think about it from the company's point of view, like how can you make it a win-win for what the company's goals are, and then what your goals are that you see needs to be changed. And I think if you try to approach it that way, that could make it a little bit easier on you, and make it more likely that those changes get enacted.
Yeah, that's interesting that you said that, right? To kind of like rally with your colleagues and your
Mhm.
coworkers to do that, and kind of brings me back to a story, a situation that I had at a company that I worked for. I don't know. I've never labeled myself as a disruptor, but I've always been that person who spoke up whenever I didn't think things were going according to plan, or felt like though as though someone is being marginalized or someone is not giving the support they want. And I remember there was an issue on the floor, and I was working in banking at that time. There was an issue on the floor, and everybody, I hate when women get into groups and they talk, and it's like, okay, there's this chatter, but when it's time to go out and take the action, nobody does that. So I remember, they're coming and they're having this like, Solita, this is the issue, and I don't understand it. These all the complaints. I'm like, okay, can we go to the manager? Do we agree that we need to go to the manager? And everybody was like, yes, yes. I put my hands up as spokesperson, went and organized that meeting. The day of the meeting, no one showed up. Like, no one showed up, only me. And I remember in that moment, I was like, okay, so we prefer to complain in a group, but when it's time to step up, we, whatever fears, whatever happened. And I made the decision from that point on, anything that I am not comfortable with or happy with, I'll raise my hand, and I made the point of saying I'm speaking on behalf of myself. Mm-hmm. And I would insert, if anyone feels the need that, okay, it's something that they agree with, they can always chime in, but I always had that. So this is the thing though. There's so many times, I'm sure our listeners can women on this call and just watching the replay can attest to that in a group as a collective, you want to go and you agree to go, but then you end up standing alone. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you, for me, it was okay because I knew myself. I knew what I believed in. And I was always that person is okay. There's only one or two things can happen. I can get a yes, I can get a no, or I can get a maybe. Right. And I've always ensured that I'm on the right footing before I approach a topic. Mm-hmm. But there are women who, they've done it, they're standing alone. And it's like, now they're afraid to put themselves out there. What do we do in that instance?
Yeah. So if it was me and I was organizing something and I had, particular time and place that we were supposed to be showing up as, I would definitely confirm and make sure the people who said they were going to be there were going to be there.
Confirmed.
Oh, you confirm. and it's, I don't know if it's about like having a written commitment, making sure everyone's like literally on the same page with like, what are our expectations? What are our responsibilities for this? What are our goals? And making sure that people are committed to it. And also maybe talking about the fears that people have. If they show up to this meeting and express what they want change, what fears do they have about the consequences? And maybe just talking that out ahead of time, they'll know that, oh, other people have these fears as well. I'm not the only person thinking this. And if we do this together, then, we'll be stronger, and then we'll be less likely to be singled out.
Oh, I love that. Just coming. I think that was probably the missing ingredient. Yes, they told me what their concerns were, but we never had that. Okay, let's put it together and package it in a way that, okay, we address your concerns, we address your fears. So I think that's a great point and a great way of approaching this particular topic, and making sure that, if it does happen at the end of the day, you're standing alone. I think that's okay as well, because you have to understand, or you have to stand true to what your values are, right? Mm-hmm. And your belief and what you will not stand for. And I think sometimes we get fearful of that because we're thinking of what another person will think. Am I going to be judged for standing up for this cause? Am I going to be judged for, being the lone ranger in this arena? And I kind of think of Naomi Osaka, right? Mm-hmm. It's where you're finding, and I think, yes, ordinary women like us, we don't have the same platform, we don't have the same leverage as these women. But I think it's encouraging to see that they're saying, okay, at the end of the day, this is my job. This is what I do, but it's not who I am. Right. And I think sometimes we have to take that into consideration. Yes, it's your job. You don't want to lose your job because that's what pays your bills. That's what, fund your dreams. You don't want to lose clients because, again, it helps you support your lifestyle. Mm-hmm. But who are you to the core? Right? Who are you to the core? And what are some of the things that you stand for? And I think that's an important thing to kind of put in the forefront of your mind.
Absolutely. And it reminds me, Salita, that so on the Speaking Your Brand podcast and a lot of presentations that I do, I talk a lot about thought leadership and this idea of, what does it mean to be a thought leader, having a unique viewpoint, being willing to be bold in your communication about it, and kind of the fears that people have regarding that. And I remember last May/June of 2020, after George Floyd was murdered and all of the protests in the streets about Black Lives Matter, kind of the resurgence of that movement with that. And so Diane Diaz, who's our lead speaking coach at Speaking Your Brand, who I knew you had at a LinkedIn Live a little while ago. So we did an episode together right after that happened called The Work of Anti-Racism as White Women, because obviously Diane and I are white. We knew many of our podcast listeners are white. Many of our clients are white. So we felt like it was really our responsibility. We felt and we wanted to do this, put this episode out, talking to our listeners about this very powerful topic, very timely topic that I just felt like there was no way I could not talk about it, as not as a business, not as a business owner, but as a human being, and especially as an American with all of this going on. And I know that there's a lot of my colleagues, other entrepreneurs, who felt very hesitant around this because they're like, I don't know, I'm going to say the wrong thing, or I don't know what to say. And I would tell them, just like, speak from your heart as a human being. What is on your mind? What is on your heart? And what do you want your listeners, your audience to know? Because even if we don't have the platform of a Simone Biles, we do have people who look to us, who listen to us, and who appreciate when we speak up and we role model things that they would want to do for themselves as well.
Yes, I'm going to be honest with you. That's one of the things that I gravitate to and I appreciate it about what you're building as Speaking Your Brand, right? Mm-hmm. It's not the cookie cutter. We're going to just pass over certain things, but you're having the difficult conversations and you are forcing, so to speak, your clients and everyone that's listening to the brand to think beyond the spaces that you're in, right? And I think that's an important aspect of it, in that these difficult situations are going to come up. You're never going to know the right thing to say. I mean, sometimes I don't even know the right thing to say, especially when it comes to Black Lives Matter. But speaking from not just your heart, but understanding as a human being, what is it you would want? What is it you feel? You have to feel something, right? And you have to look at it from that standpoint. And I think sometimes which is kind of interesting, I came across a situation where someone felt as though their child was being marginalized, right? And yes, you stood up for your child and showing your child what it means to stand up for herself, but at the same time was also concerned about, if I spoke publicly on this, if I brought this to my LinkedIn or I brought this to my social media platform, somehow I'm going to lose business, right? And I'm not sure if it's like just my mindset or who I am. It's like, you're not going to be for everyone. There's some persons who it doesn't matter what you do or say, they're totally not going to be on board with you. But I think the important thing is going back to your values again. Like, why are you standing up for this issue? Why are you talking about it? Is it because it feels like the right thing to do in the moment, or is it the right thing to do regardless?
Yes. And Salita, I hear this from a lot of people, and to your point that if the content you're creating, not you, Salita, but I mean like you, like the listeners or people out there, if the content you're creating is very superficial, so it's very like, here are these 3 strategies you can do, whatever your area of expertise is, or so here are your 3 tactics to do. If you keep your content very superficial and then things come up where like you really feel like you should be speaking up, it's going to be much more of a surprise to your audience because they're not used to it. So you may lose audience, or you may lose potential clients because it's kind of like, oh, like, where did this come from? I didn't know like she had values, or that type of thing. But if you really infuse it into what you do, the content you create, how you show up, the conversations you're willing to have, like this conversation today, the guests that you bring on your podcast or your shows, if that's part of everything you do, then it's not a surprise when you come out in support of Black Lives Matter. Your audience is going to be waiting for it, and they're going to appreciate that you're doing that, versus it feeling like to them it's coming out of left field.
Oh, yes. That I think that's I'm on board with you on that. It's like, if you keep doing those superficials, three things to do, and I don't get the core of who you are, a sense of who you
Mhm.
are beyond, what you're pitching to me, that clean cut. It's like, who are you, right? I tend to ask my clients that, like, when we get into we're talking about working together and defining your style. It's like, who are you? Yes, you're Carol Cox, founder of
Mhm.
speaking your brand, but who are you outside of that? We took that away. Who are you? Right? So I think that's like the importance of when we think as women, when we think of women stepping out and really using their voices and really touching on topics that they may not feel comfortable with in the moment. It's kind of like going back to journaling and writing down again, what is important to me? Why is this important? And what would it mean to me if this particular issue changed, or if I brought my point of view to it? So I think it's about finding your voice as a leader, and knowing that there are going to be consequences, and being able to accept those consequences when it happens, and knowing that you haven't lost who you are because of those consequences.
Yes, and I would say there are many, many more rewards than there are negative consequences to speaking up and using your voice. And Salita, so I can say that I so appreciate that the work that you do, as an image coach and image stylist, is much more beyond, so like, what colors, should you wear, type of thing. Like, obviously color is important, but it's much deeper than that. And so I think that's why people gravitate towards you, and gravitates, to the content you're creating, like these LinkedIn lives, because you're not just doing, all right, let's clean out your closet and separate by season. You're like, okay, what does it mean to show up the way that we want to show up, where we feel confident and we feel like, kind of like, we're ready to take on the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always said to myself, I don't want to be just a personal stylist or an image coach. There are things that are important to me. Women empowerment is important to me. It's not a buzzword. It's important to me because I'm the first of five girls, right? And I had to like lead the way in terms of how I want my sisters to see the world and what I want them to do, and some of the things that I want them to be able to have. And I can't say women empowerment and not use my voice, right?
Right.
Not use my voice on issues that are important to me, and also uplifting and empowering other women to say, yes, this is who I am. It's not just about looking good. It's about being able to have that confidence and to then say, okay, these are the five things that are important to me, and I want to be able to speak on it. I want to be able to share on it. And I think that's what brings me most joy every day I think about it, the work that I do. So yeah. So I wanted to talk about, like, I read this recently, like, I don't know, sometimes when things are supposed to happen, you
Mhm.
just kind of like get the content and everything coming. It's about changing. I read recently about changing the hierarchy of, no, the archetype of women, of what society thinks that we should do. Now, we've all experienced realizing that the C-section is real. It happened. Like, a lot of women were displaced from the workplace because of COVID.
Mhm.
Like, how do they know? Because I'm looking at this from this point of view, in that, yes, some women left because they had to do the childcare. Some women left because the company no longer needed their services.
Mhm.
But you have those women who are now feeling a bit self-conscious. They lack that confidence now to then say, okay, I'm rebuilding. I have to get back in the workplace. So I have to have that confidence to share some of the things that are important to me. So there's that thin line between, do I just go with the norm, or do I speak up now on some of the things that I would have experienced in the workplace, and some of the things that I would have experienced as a result of COVID? So how do we change that?
Yeah. So yeah. So this is it's a tough question because especially if if you're out there interviewing for a position because you've had to cut back on work because of having to take care of your children during COVID and things like that, and you're going back and doing interviewing. So like I said kind of earlier on during our conversation, a lot of it's going to depend on the culture of the company that you're interviewing for or you're looking to work at. If you're the type of person where you want to that it's important to you to have your ideas and your opinions valued by your workplace, then having put out like LinkedIn articles or LinkedIn posts or some type of content that talks about, obviously from an appropriate, professional, respectful way, but talks about like the childcare crisis that we have in this country, where it's not an individual solution just to, let me just make more money so I can, have enough to afford childcare. No, it's like it's a systemic issue that as a society, we need to decide that we value women working enough that we're going to have childcare options for them. And right now, with the patriarchal system that we've lived in for millennia, our society does not value women working enough or mothers working enough to provide childcare for them. That's just the way it is. So obviously I feel strongly about this and I'm not interviewing for a job somewhere. But if you are, and again, the culture that you want to work in would value that, then I say, it behooves you to speak up. However, if you're in a position where you need income, right, for whatever, the situation that you're in, then yes, like, let's be real about it. You may want to just like, let me stick to my resume, let me stick to my skill set, and let me get a position at a company, for the time being, and then decide what I want to do later. So I would say always kind of check in with yourself and think about, where am I at right now? How much margin, like how much room do I have to maybe not get this next job or at this one company? And how long can I wait for that better job at the kind of company culture that's going to appreciate me?
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I think sometimes we get so passionate about certain things, like the different topics and different, is that passion sometimes can take it over. And I know sometimes for me as well, it's like, okay, I'm passionate about this. And then I'll be like, oh yeah, but I needed to not, so to speak, conform to anything or try to make myself less than, because we want to do more as human beings. We should speak up for things that's important to us and show up strongly and boldly as we can. But there's also that balance, right? And I think sometimes we have to be able to weigh that and remember to weigh that in, but not put yourself in a situation where you're not able to be authentically yourself, right? So you don't want to show up just the way we're talking about those cookie cutter content, where you get on the interview and you're having that interview posture and answering the questions exactly the way you think you should. And then you get on the job and you see something and it's like, oh, I said I was squeaky clean, but now,
Right.
but now this. So it's just balancing and knowing. And I like what you said, just balancing and knowing, what you want and the environment that you're going into. If you're going in one that you don't quite think it's theirs yet with the viewpoints that you have, I think you can go in as well, but still try and find ways to gradually change or add your viewpoint to it. Is not, because I think one of the worst things that you can do is going to a job just for the sake of going into it and just clocking in and clocking out. You lose part of who you are. And I can tell you that from my own personal experience. You lose part of who you are. You want to be able to contribute and want to be able to help the company that you're working for change the culture in a way that supports women and supports the idea of women being in the workplace. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, so this has been an amazing conversation. I think there's like so many different topics that I can come up with in terms of how can we empower women and what are some of the things that they can start doing today to get themselves into that space where they feel comfortable asking for more and feel comfortable using their voice and knowing that they don't have to tie their worth to the business or the job that they do, and knowing that they are more resilient than, like, we're more resilient than we think we are. We have more power, more leverage than we think we do, but we have to do it as a collective. I think that is very important. Yes, you can have an individual voice, but if we come together as a collective, I think that is where the changes that we really want to see, we'll be able to make them. So I wanted to know from you, as we think about wrapping this up, it's like, based on the work that you're doing, what are some tips that you can share with women who want to use their voice but not sure as to where they should start?
So this is what I did for myself, and this is what works for a lot of our clients too, is create regular content. And you can choose what that content, what the form that content looks like. So you could do, if you like to write, write blog posts, articles, LinkedIn articles, that kind of thing. So if you like to write. If you like to talk, do a podcast. If you like to talk and be on video, do LinkedIn Lives like Salita is doing here. The act of producing regular content, and I would say at least weekly. So I do a weekly podcast. I know, Salita, you're doing your weekly LinkedIn Lives. If you like to write, do a weekly article. Producing content weekly, number one, it gets you out of your head and gets you processing ideas. Number one. Number two, it gets you over perfectionism. Because if you're thinking about, like, I have to write the perfect article or I have to produce the perfect video because it's like my one chance, like I have one shot at it, you're going to procrastinate, or it's going to take forever and you're never going to put it out there. When you have to produce weekly, you get over your perfectionist tendencies really fast because you literally have no choice. Like, you just have to get it out there. Mm-hmm. And so that is my thing. Like, pick the content that you like, that's the least friction for you to do weekly, and then just start doing it weekly. And then you'll see that your ideas will start to take shape. You'll get much more confident sharing your opinions, and your ideas are going to evolve as you talk more and as you talk more with other people. If you have guest contributors to what you're doing.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Carol. I appreciate that. And I am sure everyone that's listening or watching the replay would appreciate this conversation. Of course, if you want to learn more as to how to craft your signature talk, and just learning how to become a thought leader, then of course, go follow Carol. I can tell you wouldn't regret it. So thank you very much for joining me. Before we go, Carol, I wanted to ask you I kind of like to end these on more of a, like a softer note. So I wanted to know your favorite female author.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, you want me to answer? Okay, go ahead.
And the second question is, I'm going to go movie wise. Usually I do closet, but I'm going to do movie wise. If there's a movie being made about you, who would you like to play you?
Okay. All right. So I'll go with my favorite author is Elizabeth Gilbert. So she's most well known for Eat, Pray, Love, the memoir that became the movie. Oh. But my favorite books by her is, she has a book called Big Magic, nonfiction, that she wrote several years ago now, about where do creative ideas come from. And it's like, these ideas are like out there, like in like this collective unconscious. And sometimes ideas will download to you, and then maybe download to someone else halfway across the world at the same time. That's where inventions happen, and right, or idea, whatever it happens to be. So that's a great book about kind of getting past the fear of being creative. So Big Magic. But my favorite book of hers is a fiction. It's a novel called The Signature of All Things. It's about a woman who's a botanist, and it takes place during the 1800s, 19th century. So beautiful writing. So that's my favorite author.
Oh, excellent.
And let's see, in a movie, who would play me? That's a really good question. Oh, let's see. And the first thing I think of, like, okay, who would be someone who looks like me, who's blonde? And I think of Reese Witherspoon, right? Like someone like that. But you know who I love? So I watched the Apple TV show called The Morning Show. It was on last year. Yes. Kind of like Jennifer Aniston and Steve Carell. It's kind of like a Matt Lauer, type of storyline. But I loved Jennifer Aniston's character in that show, because she kind of, she comes in like very like narrow vision, both her career and her kind of her blinders on to what's going on. And then she, as the series unfolds, like she expands her understanding of what's going on. So I'll have Jennifer Aniston play me.
Oh, excellent. I can see both Jennifer and Reese playing you. But that was an excellent series as well. I watched that and I was like, wow. Yeah, it was an
Yeah.
excellent series. So thank you very much, Kyle. I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate the audience for tuning in. If you have any questions on this particular topic that we spoke about, do drop those in the comments and we will get back to you. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Have a great one, guys. Bye.
Thank you.